You are listening to the Let Me Overthink About It podcast, where I dive into a series of topics that occupy my anxious mind. I'm Sam Madore, overthinker extraordinaire. This week, I'm overthinking about being careful with your thoughts with my pal Anne Janelle. Anne is an incredible cellist. Her performing has brought her to 13 countries around the world. She performs folk music and collaborates with her husband, James Hill. And I absolutely loved this chat, and I hope you do too. I am here with Anne Janelle. Hello, Anne. How are you?
Hello, I'm great. Nice to be here.
It's so nice to see you. I'm a little disappointed. We had tried to do in person, and Mother Nature
Yes.
did not allow.
No, I'm glad I'm not driving right now, so we will use technology for its best, when we
Yes.
meet when we can't meet.
Exactly. And yeah, we're recording this in the middle of a Nova Scotia snowstorm, a pretty bad one. I was thinking about this. I think the first time that I met you was in Joyful Yoga's class where you played live cello
Okay.
during the
Yeah.
yoga class. I don't know that I met you then, but I certainly knew that you were there and you did an amazing job. And I have to
Thank you.
say, it remains one of my favorite yoga experiences to date.
Oh, that's lovely.
It
Thank
was so
you.
great. Like, just think about, I'm just talking to the listener here now. Just think about being
Yeah.
able to do yoga with a live cello and just how much more in the moment we were able to get with that. It was just really a really cool experience.
Mm. Yeah, and likewise, I mean, as a musician, so in those situations I'm improvising, and so oftentimes I'll take a chant or some musical element as a starting place, but then improvise on it. And so it's a very like relationship based work. So it brings me into the
Mm.
present because I'm reacting to what you guys do, and
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
it's beautiful. I hope we'll do it again soon. It's
Well,
lovely to
yeah.
do.
That was years and years ago, and I was thinking that before we went live on this recording was, man,
Mm.
we need to bring that back. We'll have to talk to Joy and see if
Yeah,
she can
yeah,
make that
yeah,
happen.
yeah.
Thank you for overthinking with me. This is like I'm looking forward to this conversation. I love talking to musicians about mental wellness because it's such a huge part of my mental wellness.
Mm.
So I love to take any opportunity to chat with a musician. And so maybe just give the listeners who don't know who you are and what your musicianship is, maybe just give a little background.
Yeah, sure. Well, I started my musical life as a classical musician, so I'm a classically trained cellist. Yeah, I went quite far down that path actually. I got a master's degree even in cello performance, and then things kind of took a turn, as they often do.
Yep.
I met my husband, who is a folk musician and singer-songwriter. And so I ended up doing a lot more of that style of music and collaborating with him. James Hill is my husband. And so, yeah, for the past, let's see, we put out our first duo record in 2009. So it's been a little while that I've been mostly a singer-songwriter, and I still use my cello. It's still my primary instrument, but
Hmm.
it's, yeah, often used more as an accompanimental instrument these days.
It's so cool. And to see the evolution of that, like when I think about the progression of any sort of creative endeavor, it's like you feel like you've got blinders on to a certain degree. It's like this is what I do, this is what I am trained to do, but being able to sort of roll with that and develop over time and experiment really.
When you're finding a life in a creative pursuit, there's no blueprint. There's
Yeah.
nobody. I mean, the closest thing was what I thought I was going to do, which was to become a professional orchestral musician.
Yeah.
That's what I was trained to do. That's what I had my sights set on when I was a girl. And but I think like a lot of things that you look at from the outside, as soon as you get closer to that thing, you sort of realize that you didn't really know what that thing was when you were looking at it from a distance.
Yep.
Um, and so the closer I got to that as a career option or choice, the more I realized it wasn't the right thing for me. So yeah, I mean, I guess it takes a certain amount of honesty to be able to um, just keep checking in, keep checking in. I mean, after there was a whole phase of my career where I was really interested in bringing contemporary dance and cello together, and I was working
Mm.
with modern dancers. Actually, when we first moved to Nova Scotia, so that was right after my master's degree, so 2007 we first moved here,
Okay.
and that was a big passion, and then that kind of ran its course. So yeah, it's interesting, and every step along the way you're collecting, I think, as an artist, and
Yeah,
you collect all of these things. And if I look at every song that I create now has these little imprints from all of the yeah, these creative endeavors that I've undertaken.
I love that. And I can hear, a lot of people relating to that, a lot of creative people relating to that, myself included. And sometimes you're in a
Mm.
phase where you're like, oh, yeah, I forgot that I used to do this, fill in this blank, right? And then you sort
Yeah,
of
yeah.
you're able to kind of remind yourself of some of the things that you did and can sort of tie those things in. It's really kind of
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, and it happens subconsciously too, right? Like it
Yes.
just yeah, you just bring everything you are to whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah, I love that. And do you consider yourself, a lot of creatives are, so I'm asking this question. Do you actually consider yourself to be an overthinker?
Okay, I have to tell you, um, when I was preparing for this interview,
Yes.
it was wonderful that you sent me some questions to contemplate before. And I was like, oh, maybe I could talk about this, maybe I could talk about this, maybe, oh, maybe this. And then I was like, wait, I am overthinking as I'm preparing for the overthinking
I love it.
podcast. Perfect, right? Oh my goodness. So, I would say in a word, yes, probably that is me. But so I've taken a bit of a journey, a personal journey as well. And alongside the musical journey, I feel like when you choose to be a creative artist, there's a certain responsibility to like get your stuff in a row too, like
Yep.
make sure you're presenting a human that is as whole as you can be.
You want to
And
say get
so
your shit together, and you
I
can.
I do that's what I wanted to
It's
say. Thank you
okay.
for saying it for me.
I could tell.
But you know what I mean? So
Yes.
there's a lot of personal growth that is in tandem with this. And so what I was curious about is you're articulating it as overthinking. How do you know you've gone too far? Like how do you know?
I hear you. And I think it's subjective. Like, I think it's just whatever you think. If you feel I think it's whatever your limit is. So
Mm,
for me, I know that my train of thought can get ahead of me, can get away from me. So I
yeah.
know when it's like, okay, Sam, I hate this phrase, beaten a dead horse, because it just feels so gross to say, but I
Yeah.
can't think of a similar phrase right
Yeah.
now, but
Mm,
you can just tell when you've
you've
gotten to
done the
that point
thing.
where it's no
Yeah.
longer serving you.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people find themselves in this position. And I think for me, one of my practices is to not use judgmental language with myself. So,
Mm.
as I was thinking about this overthinking, um, to me, I was like, oh, well, I don't label myself as that because that feels a bit too judgy to me.
Mm.
But I feel like I do it, but I articulate it in a slightly different way. Maybe this is semantic, but I feel like as a songwriter, I'm so interested in language.
Yes.
So I will, when you're noticing, oh, I'm doing that. Oh, so it's more like, oh, I'm still thinking, or like,
Right.
oh, I'm thinking again about that, or whatever it is. But for me, yeah, I just try and be really careful about those judgments. So I'll say like yes because it's true, but maybe articulated it slightly differently.
I hear that. And I think what I'm hearing from you too, Anne, is you're the educator in you as well,
Mm,
right? Because it's also it's how you're treating yourself for sure, and not wanting to put those what you would consider to be almost like a negative connotation or negative
yeah,
word.
yeah.
And I feel like that's the educator in you coming out too, in terms of not wanting to associate that maybe that language with a student or your son or,
Mm,
anything
yeah.
like that as well.
Yeah, yeah. I'm an avid cello teacher, and I feel the same. Every time I step into a lesson, it's the same thing. I need to be able to offer my full, as mature as it can be self
Yeah.
to my students so that they can flourish. Yeah, that's a big passion of mine too. So that's fun you picked up on that.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so funny. And when I started the podcast, it was, and the name of the podcast for me, it was intentionally trying to find humor in
Yeah. Yeah,
the,
yeah, yeah.
in, it sounds silly to say, but in mental illness, if
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can
Yeah, yeah,
find
yeah.
humor in it. But I
Totally.
love your take
Totally.
on that. I really do.
A lot of humor is negative. Like we often
Totally.
find humor in those negative places. So yeah, again, it's
It's
a
the
little bit confusing.
self-deprecation is
Yeah,
kind of what it
totally.
is, right?
Yes, which is hilarious. It really is. You know, like
Yeah.
it works. That's why we do it. But I think, as like, yeah, I'm just trying to be very careful with myself about my own labels and my own language when I'm speaking about myself or to myself.
I love that. And so when it comes to that side of you, that side that might think more about certain things, when you're experimenting with new things, and like, for example, when you and James were coming together and you were putting out that first collaboration, do you find that during that transition is when you tend to lean more toward overthinking or putting more thought into
Mm.
things?
I feel like thinking is kind of counter to creation. So
Yes. Oh, I like
when I am
that.
in a creative flow, I need to not be thinking, barely at all. And this
Hmm.
happens with songwriting. And so I need to be able to shut that part of myself off. Ironically, when I've made the song and I'm practicing it for the stage, that's when that like incessant mind comes in. Like I'm
Hmm.
I'm just about to do this video shoot with a friend of mine, and I cannot stop thinking about the song we're gonna do. Like it's just going,
Right.
going, going. And it's useful. It's very useful because it's just mental practice.
Yeah.
And yet, it kind of looks the same as that sort of overworking mind. There's the good kind of thinking and the not, like the productive thinking and the maybe not so
Yeah.
productive thinking, right? So there's the thinking that is helping us to prepare, or helping us to some things are intellectual pursuits that we need to jam out in the brain.
Yeah.
We need to do it there.
Yeah.
But I think the danger is, and I know people like this who think it's like it all happens here. And the world of thinking is so limited. It is so minute in terms of our own capacity as human beings, that I think we need to have a perspective on that. It's like, okay, thinking is useful for these situations, and I'm going to use that as a tool. When I don't want to be thinking, then, there's a choice to be made. Sometimes I still can't quiet my mind. I have this, speaking of yoga, this like ninja meditation. It's the tiniest little
Oh,
thing
I like
that I
this.
just fit in to my life wherever I can. And it's just thinking about the word Om on an inhale and thinking about word Om on an exhale. And it's just Om, Om, Om. And I can just do a few rounds of that, get into my body and out of my head. So I've developed some strategies. So if I'm in the creative zone, oftentimes the muse just takes my hand and run, like I'm just running to try and catch her. It's like, okay, I'm going,
Amazing.
I'm trying to keep up. But sometimes you sit down to create and you just can't get out of your own head. You can't stop
Yeah.
thinking. And so, having these like very practical but really simple tools to quiet the mind so that you can move into that creative space, I find is really helpful. The other thing, I was in a studio a few months ago having a really bad day, like really bad. Trying to lay something down. It was not happening. A lot of negative, like I
Yeah.
can't do this and what's going on. And then I looked over and there was a spider about the size of like a sesame seed who was propelling herself from the ceiling to the floor
Yeah.
to like make a spider web. And I was like, whoa, okay. Like it's just those moments of noticing, getting
Yeah.
out of your own, negative spaces.
Oh, yeah.
It's tricky. It's a gray area because thinking is useful and then it's not
Yeah.
useful, and so it's
And
about
it's
managing those uses, I think.
That's right. Recognizing it within yourself and finding, I mean, this is like an elusive word to me, but finding balance within that. I think we have to take a pause to listen to some of Anne's beautiful music. Here goes.
You've never been this kind of tired in your life. Your heart is still reeling from when it was burst open wide. You're a mother. Don't know where you've gone or if you're coming back. Abandon the signs that say don't worry, you're still on track. You're a mother.
That was amazing. You can check out all of Anne's music on her YouTube channel, on her website. There's links in our show notes. Please take it in and let's get back to our chat. I'm
Oh,
going back to
yeah.
your spider because I'm just imagining in that moment, and maybe I'm wrong, but was it the concept of like, what is this spider doing? She's just like propelling, she's just about to propel herself down to the floor. And like if she can do that, then I
Yes,
can sort of like
yes,
I can do whatever it is I've got in front of
yes.
me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was
Right.
like, what am I worried about?
Yes, I
This
love that.
one note is like not quite in tune. It's just perspective, you know?
Yes.
And I find that often when I'm able to tap into nature, like I'm just awestruck by what is happening, like even, in the midst of this snowstorm, like it's beautiful. It's
It
it's
is.
it's striking. You go outside and I'm up to my knees in snow and it's just the most gorgeous sight. So yeah, I think it is that perspective and that like, well, yeah, if this little spider can like literally, I mean, the scale, that was the thing that blew my mind.
Right.
She's just
Yeah.
like, it would be like us trying to propel ourselves to like, I don't know, up the CN Tower or something. It's like it massive for her
Yeah.
size. And she's just like, doo-doo-doo, I'm just gonna get her done.
Yeah. Just a day in the life, man. Yeah.
Totally. I am actually really appreciating this conversation about thinking also because I've been working with this Chinese doctor and he always every time he says to me, stop thinking, stop
Mm.
thinking. So so what I'm coming to realize also is the physical ramifications of thinking. And I now can
Mm.
feel it in the body, and I, especially to do with negative thoughts or
Oh yeah.
positive thoughts, almost like I need to, because I love thinking. I love it, I must admit.
Yeah.
Uh, I
You
need
love the
to
good
like,
thinking though, right?
yeah,
Yeah, the good
yeah,
side
I
of it.
do.
Yeah.
Like, I really love thinking. I really love thinking about things. And so for me to kind of reconcile that, I mean, it's exhausting on the body, honestly.
Hmm.
Uh, so to make that taxing thing worth it, I basically have like thinking times where it's like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
going to devote myself to thinking right now. Or either I have a specific something to mull over or whatever it is, just so that it doesn't spill into the other activities of the day. And
And I'm with you there. And for me, it's thinking, but I need to, in order to get it out of my head as the best I can, I have to write it. So it's almost
mm,
like,
hmm
that just brain dump,
Yep,
like just to be
yep.
like, okay, just because I'm not going to be able to do this thing until I get this other thing out of my head, you just kind of vomit it all down on a piece of paper
Yeah,
and
but
move on.
it's also another way of gaining perspective. When you write something,
Yeah,
it externalizes it. So you're doing exactly the same thing that I do when I look out the window. It's just like you're
right.
getting outside,
Yeah.
getting some perspective on it. Yeah, yeah, I love writing too.
Well, yeah, I mean, all of that creative energy, right? And it's so funny. This is such a philosophical conversation. I love this because, thinking outside the box a bit about thinking, which sounds kind of
Mm,
corny, but you know what I mean?
mm,
It's,
yeah.
yeah, kind of dissecting it a little bit, which is great. And so so you're a writer, you're a musician. Do you find that I often ask this question of musicians because it's curious for me. Like
Mm,
I go to music when I need to, it's another way, like writing, whatever. I go and I listen to music. I'm not a musician, but I'll listen to certain music when I need to sort of get out of my a certain headspace or I want to dance or I want whatever it is. Do
yeah.
you find as a musician you do that as well? Or are you so much in the music as your creative outlet that you need to find some other way to sort of shake that up?
Yeah, I would say that I do that. I can't listen like a normal person though. I find because of my training, I hear everything, which is a blessing and a curse.
Oh, yeah.
And so my practice of late has been to basically try and unlearn my training, come to music with fresh ears. So there's this beautiful concept called Shoshin, which is the Zen Buddhist concept of beginner's mind. You've probably come across this, but
I haven't.
it's basically in everything that you do, you approach it as if you've never done it before. So there's joy, there's delight, there's enthusiasm, there's passion, if you think of all of those things that you start, at the beginning, you have so much energy for it.
Yeah.
And then as you learn, it kind of wanes so I've really been trying to embrace this practice, especially when it comes to listening to music, because I was, me talking about trying not to use judgmental language on
Right.
myself.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying not to use judgmental language on other people as well, but I
Yeah.
find with something that I know so well, it is so hard to not go to that judgy place. So, yeah, so it's a beautiful opportunity for me to practice this Shoshin. It's like, okay, so I can hear that's a little bit out of tune, but you know what? I'm listening for intention. I'm listening for expression. I'm listening for creativity. I'm listening for
Yeah.
communication. I'm just changing my almost like my rubric or whatever, for
Yeah.
whether I enjoy something or not. I love that you dance to music or you look to music when you feel like dancing. We
Yes.
have a record player in our kitchen.
Awesome.
Oftentimes when we are making supper or whatever,
Yep.
and right now, on rotation, so my son gets to choose, but anyways, we only have records we like in the collection. So we have like Michael Jackson's Thriller record and
Yes.
Jamiroquai,
Oh
Canned
my.
Heat, so good. U2 he loves. So, like
Yep.
there are these sort of feel good songs that are so vastly different than what I would ever create myself.
Totally. Yeah.
That I think that also makes them more enjoyable when it's not clouded by my own like comparison to
Training.
what it is that
Yeah.
I do. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or training. Exactly. Yeah.
I love that. It's like me, I'm an event planner. I've been an event planner for most of my career in some form or
Mhm.
another. I
Yeah.
can't go to
Yeah.
an event without sitting there and like, oh, wow, they should have, or this should have been done. I can't stop
Totally.
myself. Like
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
something that happens so organically. So it's similar,
Well,
but
and I think it's a result of the training. And so
yes.
once you can get outside of the training,
Yeah.
that's when you can start to get back to that.
I love that concept is going back to the beginner's mind. And it reminds me too, and I'm doing a shameless plug here, but it reminds me too of the kids book that my husband and I just put out.
Mm.
Live like a dog, which I'm not comparing kids to
Oh,
dogs, but I kind of am in this context. But it's like going back to that moment of like finding joy in things that we just take for granted as adults.
yes.
So, like, seeing a butterfly and actually, appreciating the beauty of that butterfly and how it came to be, or like
Yeah.
just being able to take time to read a book and finding joy and having that time and space to read and learn something new.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I love this because it's very similar to that concept.
Yeah, and I think the sort of the overarching concept maybe is mindfulness.
Yes,
And
yeah,
we hear a lot about this now and being in the present moment and all
yeah,
of these invitations. Yeah, but where I love the beginner's mind specifically is it's just one doorway into mindfulness that just seems particularly resonant for me right now. So yeah, but it's
yeah,
all good. However you can get to a place of joy, that's what you should be
right.
doing.
And I think it's this, and this is the theme of the book too, is the simple things, right? It's like
Yes.
I think in concept we're like, oh, it has to be some big deal or it has to be some elaborate thing. But ultimately, going back to basics and paring that down to the simplest of things is really what it comes down to. And so you don't
Yeah,
have to have this big, ginormous, you don't have to meet this big goal in order to celebrate success. You can have a tiny win and celebrate that.
totally. Totally. Okay. Can I have a shameless plug now too?
Yes, of course you can.
So it reminds me of my latest record that I put out last
Yeah.
fall called How Best to See the Light. And again, when you're in the throes of the creative process, there's no thought. You're just following what's
Yeah.
happening. And then after that thing has been created, then you have the vantage point to step back. And one of the huge things for me about that record was simplicity. So I am a classically trained
Yes.
cellist. I barely play piano. Like, I mean, barely. I had to do a little bit for my degree requirements. But I've started writing in the past couple of years on the piano because chords are so much easier on the piano than on the cello. They're very awkward. And yeah, so it just sort of happened organically that I was writing on the piano. And then I had this funny and crazy idea to record the songs in single takes on my phone in the living room on the piano that I wrote them on and like making all of these decisions, not really understanding why in the moment.
Yeah.
And then realizing, like taking that step back and being like, oh, yeah, that was me trying to find the joy again in the music, trying to um,
Oh, I love
get
that.
to the place of beginner's mind again. And, you
Yeah.
know, and it's a risk. Like I was kind of, well, I still am like kind of nervous about it because you never know. Somebody stumbles on that. They don't know your other work and they're like, "Oh, okay, what's this?" And it's super lo-fi
Yeah.
and it's super simple on the piano. But the thing that was fascinating is that Anne Janelle, the artist, that's what comes out. I don't have the technique to do something fancy. I literally don't. I don't have that ability on the
Right.
piano. Cello, no problem.
Yeah.
But you fall into those same habits, you fall into that technique. Sometimes it becomes a shield, even, but where everything is stripped away, but a few little basic chords, then
Yeah.
it's really about the lyrics, it's really about the melodies, it's really about um, embodying that simplicity, that vulnerability, and yeah, finding your way back to the things that are the essence. It's almost like finding that essence of music again. So it was a wonderful, um, kind of a crazy trip to do it that way.
Yeah.
But it just reminded me when you were speaking of simplicity
Yes.
that's been a real interest of mine lately too.
Well, that's interesting. It all ties in, right? To
Yeah,
like you were saying about the beginner's mind. And like, but what I love the most about what you just the story that you just told is that it came to you so organically. Like it wasn't like you sat down and were like, I need to make a record that is fill in the blank, stripped down or whatever. It was just something that came to you so organically and you trusted
yeah,
that. I love it.
yeah, yeah. And I'm not above anything. I've tried that way of working where I sit down with an idea. In fact, the um the title track, How Best to See the Light,
Yeah.
is a song that tries to contextualize darkness. So it's a song, it's a winter solstice song.
Hmm.
And how best to see the light than to bring it to the darkest night. That's the beginning line.
Yeah.
And the idea being that again, that's this perspective. You bring the light into the darkness. That's how you see it. And then it's inseparable from the darkness. All of these concepts. But that song came tumbling out one morning, very close to the winter solstice, after this friend of mine had shared this beautiful Word Sisters, I think it's WIRD. Anyway, they've got this solstice song that's so rousing, and the beautiful imagery about like toasting to the darkness and like sitting around the
Right.
warm fire. And I was like, oh, I want one of those. I totally want to write a song like that. And then I sat down and I could not do it. I was like, this is not working at all because I was just trying
Because
to
you were
force
forced
it.
trying to
And
force it. Yeah, yeah.
I know, but I still really wanted a song like that. But then the gift came the next morning. And although if you hear the two songs side by side, there's practically nothing that you could find in
Right.
common except for that solstice thread. One came from the other, and I think it's such a beautiful way that we process and internalize and then present things to each other. And oftentimes artists will talk about feeling as if they're not at the helm of what's going on. They're channeling,
Yeah.
or and even if you think about inspiration and how that gets processed. And yeah, it's beautiful because it connects you to this web of art and music. And then you find your own way of kind of expressing what it is that's in your heart, which yeah, is just for
I
me,
love
I have
that.
found it's best when I'm just really honest and just let what's going to happen.
But I love that because I feel like even though you were forcing that in that moment, it didn't come to you in the moment that you were trying to force that feeling of a song or whatever that is that you were inspired by. But I love that that still informed the song that came out. It didn't come out when you were expecting it to, or how you were expecting it to, but there's
Yes.
still that inspiration. There is still that, that force behind it, even though it
Yeah,
came to you
yeah.
later on.
Yes, yes, and not in the way that I had wanted it, and yet
Yeah.
it came out like it's actually my favorite song that I've ever written.
Oh, that's
So,
amazing.
it's like it just comes. I just always feel grateful when it comes.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Do you find you compare yourself to other musicians? There's so many other, like, I can't even imagine being in your industry and not doing this because I am a terrible compare. I compare myself. It's one of the things that drives me most crazy about myself. But do you find you do that with your industry?
Yes. Yes, I
Yeah.
do. And well, growing up in the classical music world, I love it dearly. I love the music dearly, but I feel like one of the most challenging things about that upbringing for me was the comparison. So
Yeah.
you're at festival, like literally you're playing exactly the same piece as the person that's playing right after you. You're the same age, you're the same state, like it's very natural to want to compare.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the reasons that drew me to becoming more of a creative artist is that I now, like, I just tried to get outside of that comparison world. So it's like, well, I write Anne Janelle songs and nobody can tell me that I'm doing it wrong. Um,
Yes.
However, there is still this element of, yeah, like similar people, similar stage, similar age, similar experience. And I
Yeah.
find that for me personally, social media really exacerbates this. And so until I until I become more evolved, I just have to step back. I have to be really careful about that comparison because it leads to envy, it leads to
Yeah.
jealousy, and it leads to places that I don't really want to inhabit.
Like, do you feel like it would also infringe on your creativity or finding that flow of creativity?
I think negativity always has a way
I guess, yeah.
of closing. You know, if you think about I think one of my main jobs as an artist is to stay open, to hone my sensitivity and to just be wide open to the world all the
Hmm.
time. And so every time there's an aspect of negativity, whether it be judgment, whether it be comparison, envy, I feel myself closing. I can feel this um, hardening, this removing myself
Yeah.
from the life that I really want to be inhabiting and really want to be open and full to. So everything that leads me there, I'm 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 trepidatious. You know, like I'm really need to make sure that when I'm treading in those dangerous waters, that I do it really mindfully. And I
Yeah.
actually, this friend of mine, I remember I'm sure I was saying something that was in somewhat of a comparison, and she was like, "Don't compare ever." She was just like
Yeah.
so, so clear about it, and I was like, "Whoa, what? You can do that? What do you mean?" Um, and I heard that because inevitably, so first of all, you're always comparing your insides with everybody else's outsides. So that's one.
100%. Yes.
And two, there is nobody exactly like you. So
Yeah.
there's no way, you're always comparing apples to oranges. There is no way of comparing
Yeah.
honestly, truly, even twins, you know,
Yes.
everybody has their own package, their own journey, their own karma, their own whatever.
Yeah.
And so comparison, I think is not a fruitful way usually. However, you know, that's confusing again. There's these gray areas. Like sometimes I do want to like compare almost like to try and get best practices or to try and
Right.
um uh yeah, I don't know, just like become more of my be inspired, you know?
Yeah.
So there's that fine line, but yeah, I mean I it's definitely something that I struggle with.
I love the friend who's like, stop. Like, don't you wish you could just have that in your head when you needed it and actually just have that, like, whenever, just a kick in the butt or whatever it is to just shake
You
yourself out
should
of
have
it?
that as like your ringtone or
Yeah.
something.
Listen, I could talk to you for so long. This has been a really inspirational conversation, and I took down a
Yay.
couple of quotes from my favorite quote that I took down from you is thinking is counter to creation. And
Hmm.
my word of the year this year is create. So I'm taking that
Oh.
and I'm like tattooing it on my forehead because
Mm,
it's so true, and I've never thought of it in that way, is that you have to
mm.
really separate, really trying to over process something in order to you can't create in that mindset. So I love that. But I want to ask you, do you have a quote that you go to? Like, is there something that when you're, maybe you feel stuck or you need a bit of inspiration, do you have quotes? Is that a thing that you do, or do you have one that you want to share?
I have been deeply inspired by the writings of Chuang Tzu, who was an ancient Chinese Taoist philosopher. And honestly, I feel like every time I pick that book up, there is a new quote that is
Mm.
incredibly inspiring. And so, um, James and I are going to be embarking on the creation of some new work, and who knows where that will land.
Yay.
But we'd like to bring it's with our new band Champagne Weather, and we're gonna bring that together with some of these writings of Chuang Tzu, maybe in a longer form. Anyway, I shouldn't say too much because I have no idea what it's going to turn out
I know.
like. But
I kind of
he
like the
found this.
sneak peek though.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He found this beautiful quote, with my spirit for a horse. And I just love that idea. With my spirit for a horse, something like I won't have a need for the world or something like that. Um,
Mm.
but the idea that you have the capacity to carry yourself away, out of all of the thinking thoughts, out of all of the muck and mire of social media and, you know, very human conflict. There's a beautiful aspect of the human spirit that is the horse. So I didn't remember it well, but that's a quote
I
that's
love it.
been really um, yeah, resonating with me and inspiring for me. But every time I pick up that book, there's a new quote that I'm like,
Oh,
this
I love
is
it.
rocking my world.
Yes, I love that. And I love that it's also, tying into your next project as well, which is
Well,
great.
that's why I just find it so inspiring. And when I sat down thinking about a longer form, and if you're a writer of story, you know what I mean. It's like there's this point where you're looking at a narrative and what does that look like, and of all the stories that we know through ages past, um and to me it was like, what is the story that I want to tell? Like what is, and it's not the like hero quest I'm definitely not interested in telling that
Right.
story,
Yeah.
for many reasons. But for me, it's the telling the story of um, this human journey that is so much more than we even know or can understand or can think about.
Oh man, I love it. Any other sneak peeks?
I would love to talk about what's coming next.
Yes.
Um, I'm gonna say this so that it forces me to do it.
Oh, you're so much like me. It's not even funny. I love it.
So I'm gonna launch a podcast. That's my plan.
That's
And hopefully now
exciting.
that I've said it, I will do
It
it.
will happen.
It
Yes.
will happen. So that's coming. I don't know when, but so what I've done is with this latest record, How Best to See the Light, I've taken every song and done like a little bit of analysis of it. So I go behind the scenes, like what it was like to create it, what inspired it, what are some of the musical elements that I think are worth sharing and contemplating. So that's the Said the Song podcast, and I'm really hoping to launch that.
Getting that behind the scenes look at things, I love that. Like to know where the inspiration was, but also to kind of see the inner workings, which is so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I think it is fascinating. Like I feel like that about other artists. So I
Yeah.
hope that people will feel that way. Um, and then yeah, I mentioned the Champagne Weather Band, which is a new creation of James and I, and we have a third revolving band member. We have some exciting plans. We're going to be launching 4 EPs through the next 2 years. And the first one is coming out in the spring. So
Yay.
we're gonna have a local show in Truro, a little bit
Amazing.
of touring happening in Canada with that. And then
Sweet.
next year, what I'm really hoping is well, James is just about to launch his next solo record, which is a collaboration. It's called You Kids. And it's the collaboration of him and like 300 fans all over the world. And they had the opportunity to record on the record and to um, be a part of, like, it's a professional recording. I mean, he's
Yes,
releasing
how
it like
cool is
it's
that?
right. And I was witnessing this whole thing and just the depth of connection,
Yeah,
these like musical ahas, these like bucket list people for people, all of these amazing things happening as a result of that. So I'm interested in, not in that same kind of way, but having I'm gonna launch starting next year, I hope, a project that brings together some some community building, the possibility of recording on the record with me. It's just ways of like getting outside of the ego that's like, oh, well,
mm,
come to me, flock around and, you know, uh, like just, yeah, I feel like sometimes as artists, you feel a bit ego driven, and I've never understood that. That's never been a part of the interest of mine to
right.
be a performer.
Yep.
And so I'm looking for ways. And I'd love to have a whole other chat with you about that sometime, about ways of, yeah, just engaging fans and bringing people into the music. And there's probably an element of teaching and
Oh yeah.
pedagogical element as well, just bringing people into the music in a way that's really meaningful and deep, and not like, hey, check out my latest single. It's
Right.
like,
Yeah,
yeah, I just want to, I'm thirsting for that kind of interaction. So that's,
I
I
love
I
it.
won't say any more than that because I really don't know what's going to happen, but
Yeah,
that's what's coming in 2025. Yeah.
I love that. Man, I love that you're even thinking about 2025, but that is cool. Any way to interact with musicians and artists in new ways, I think is so cool for me as a spectator, 100% for sure. So
Hmm.
that's really
Hmm.
cool. Well,
Great.
listen, thank you so much, Anne. I really loved our chat, and we'll put how you can connect with Anne and her new album and all kinds of goodies in the show notes. So please take a look at that as well. So thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you so much. Always very heartwarming to be together, even virtually.
Even virtually. I love it. Thank you. Thanks again to Anne Janelle for overthinking about being careful with your thoughts. I just loved her take on overthinking. I hope you enjoyed our chat as much as I did. Thanks again to the Mental Health Foundation of Nova Scotia for supporting this podcast. It's truly, truly appreciated. Thanks for listening.